Get this show.
Hello, thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and the store. My name is Madison, and I'm the marketing manager here. And you are in Watermark Books and Cafe. We are an independent bookstore that has been in business in Wichita for 45 years. And we've been able to do that because of support from customers like you. So thank you for being here tonight. We hope you'll consider purchasing a copy of Justina's book because that continues to support us. It continues to allow us to do events like this, and it supports your favorite authors. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some upcoming events. We have an events bookmark at the register if you'd like to grab one on your way out. So it'll tell you about some upcoming stuff. But next week on Wednesday, we have an event at the Advanced Learning Library with Jeanette Walls, the author of The Glass Castle. We'll be celebrating her newest book called Hang the Moon. Okay, a couple housekeeping notes. Beverly and Justina are going to be in conversation, and then we're going to switch to a Q&A, and then after that, Justina will be signing books up here. Now let me tell you a little bit about tonight's event. Watermark Books and Cafe is so excited to welcome author Justina Neufeld and author Beverly Buller. They will be in conversation about Justina's newest book, Husta's Escape. Justina recently published this book in verse that tells her story of escaping the Russian and German armies from Ukraine, becoming a refugee in a foreign country, and eventually immigrating to the United States. Justina now lives in North Newton, Kansas. Beverly, who will be interviewing Justina, is from Neufeld but also lives in Newton, Kansas. She is a retired librarian and teacher and is the author of 4 books. We are so fortunate tonight to have these two with us to talk about Justina's story, so please join me in welcoming them.
All right, yes, this is working, good. Thank you all so much for coming this evening. I know on this particular Thursday evening you have other places you could be, and I appreciate so many of you turning out to hear Justina's wonderful story. We have gone over some questions that I will be asking her. There also will be time after she tells her story, after we finish our conversation, for questions. So if you realize there's something that in which you are interested that she did not address, there will be time after we have our conversation. All right, Justina, is your microphone on?
Hello.
Yes, it's on. Good. The book is called Justa's Escape. Your name is Justina. So who is Justa?
Well, I think I'll read a part right off the start because that will answer the question.
Yes.
My name is Justina Neufeld, but I've been called by other names. One name was Justa. They called me that at home. I was born in Ukraine in 1930. We had settled there because in 1789, Russia's ruler, Tsarina Catherine the Great, invited my German ancestors to come to farm Ukraine's fertile soil. My village, called Gnantal, was settled in 1872. After the Russian Revolution of 1917, they changed its name to Vodyanaya. About 50 families lived in Vodyanaya. In buildings designed as an early leader had prescribed, houses all exactly alike. Even the number of rooms are the same. Equidistance from the main street and from our nearest neighbors. I was the youngest of 10, 8 brothers, 1 sister. Also living with us was grandmother's unmarried sister, my great aunt, Margareta. We called all grown-ups tante, meaning aunt, and all grown-ups men, uncle. But I also thought of her as a grandmother, for mine had died before I was born. The villagers called her Tante Gretchen. For as long as I could remember, 5 of my older brothers, Peter, Gerhard, Jacob, Dietrich, and Johann, were away in other towns and cities studying. My sister, Anna, brothers Franz, Willy, and Ben still lived at home with my parents, Tante and me. Bread was our staple. We had no cereals. We drank prips, a hot roasted barley drink, and ate bread for every breakfast, but it was without butter and jam. One winter, there was no more flour to be had, so Mama mixed boiled corn flour, water, and salt, and baked schnitzel, thick crackers that were bitter and hard because they had no fat or milk in them. But in the summer, we had enough to eat because Mama grew food in our garden: potatoes, carrots, cabbage, beets, tomatoes, cucumbers, and watermelons. She saved some in the cellar for the winter, and others she pickled in crocks. When I was born, Communist Russia owned Ukraine. Joseph Stalin was Russia's leader. The Russian communists did not believe in God. Religion is the opium. It dulls people's minds, the communist philosopher said, and Stalin enforced it. He forbade religious gatherings, he closed the churches, and had some destroyed. He seized Bibles and other religious books, but some people, such as my parents, believed in God anyway. They taught us to pray, to live as if God were watching us. My people were called Mennonites. They believed only adults should be baptized, that professing faith was a serious grown-up decision, and that Christians should not participate in war. They had fled state church persecution, moving from the lowlands of Holland to Germany. Mom and Tante often sang hymns from memory. We're marching to Zion, beautiful, beautiful Zion. Mama, I asked, where is Zion? It is far, far away, she replied. Not on earth. That puzzled me. Why do you want to go there? Mama smiled. It will be better there. We'll never know hunger there. We'll be safe. Hearing Mama talk about safety made me realize that she was also afraid. Fear always hung over us. I worried that Papa would disappear in the night. as so many other men and boys have. Still, why would I want to leave my village to march to Zion? At least not yet. But I was a curious girl, longing for adventure. Perhaps someday, then I would set off to see this big world, exciting places, interesting people. I could never have imagined or predicted the way I would see the world. And this book sort of tells how I saw the world.
Thank you. That's the first section of the book. We thought that kind of gives you a little bit of background on Justina. Now, Justina, this is not the first time you've told your story. You also told your story 20 years ago in a book that has quite a bit more text. This book is written in free verse. What made you decide to basically retell your story in a much simpler format, and can you describe your writing process too?
Okay. I'm looking for the person who planted the seed. She said she'd be here, but I don't see her. It was Leslie Wright, a 6th grade teacher here in Wichita, who asked me to speak to her class one time. And after class, or during my speaking to the children, one little girl sat in the front row and her tears were running down. And later Leslie told me that her parents were getting a divorce and she didn't know where she was going to go, with her father or with her mother. So I think something resonated with what I was talking about losing my parents. And so after the speech, Leslie said, you need to write your story for children this age. We just had finished Anne Frank's story that was apparently appropriate for 6th graders. I had never thought about that. But she planted the seed. And then sometime later, I started working on it. And it was difficult starting. But then I met Beverly. I don't remember how we met. But she fed me information. She told me about books that were written for that age group. And gave me titles. And one book in particular that I liked had been written in free verse. And I thought, that's something I can do. And so I started. And Beverly continued to be my consultant all through the 2 years that it took. So, thanks, Beverly.
It was my pleasure. And it is fun to watch a book evolve, because I would say, now, can you tell us more here? Or, what are you leaving out? Or do you think this is too much? We would meet for coffee and talk about.
We had many coffees.
Yes, coffee dates. And we would, just talk about how the book was going. And knowing me, chances are very good that I also recommended other books to you to show you how other authors had told their biographical story in free verse. It does flow nicely when it's read aloud, and it makes it easier for people of all ages. You wrote it for children, but it can be read by anyone. If you want all the details, you read the bigger book. But if you want the basic story, the heart of the story, you can read Justin's Escape. Now, we heard a little bit about your childhood in the section that you read from the book, but can you share some memories of your childhood, things that maybe kids here in America wouldn't have experienced?
Well, one thing that comes to mind right away is I had no toys. I never had a doll as a child. But one of my favorite seasons was spring. There was a canal that ran close to past our house. And after all the snow and the big boulders were gone and the water was gone, my friend Elsa and I would get down into the canal and see what kind of treasures last year's water from spring had brought. Those are very happy memories. And those things that we found, mostly shards, Schorbles in Low German. We would gather, and those would become our dishes when we played house. And we would try to save them from one season to the other, although I would hide them somewhere and the next year not find them. But Elsa was a little more organized and more mature. She would keep hers, and so we would add to them and play house. That's a very fond memory I have. And unlike children here who might have toys, I had a cat. Didn't have a doll, but I had a cat.
And now you have a dog.
And I have a dog. Yeah.
So you're saying that you had a wonderful childhood for the most part until fear began to take some of that enjoyment away from you. And eventually, the book is entitled Escape, you obviously had to leave Ukraine. So what made that happen? And then can you kind of trace your journey? Because it wasn't just coming from Ukraine over here. So trace your journey and explain why you had to leave.
Okay. I recall that there was always a dark cloud hanging over us, and those were the years of 37 and 38, when the great purges happened under Soviet regime, and men started disappearing from our village. And we always lived in fear that my father would be arrested. And then in 41, war was declared with Germany. And 2 days before that, my father, or 2 days after, he was arrested. And we never saw him again. So we lived, the Germans occupied our village within 2 weeks of the war starting. They overran it very quickly. And immediately after that, the collective farm was dismantled, and each family was given some machinery or horses or whatever, but so many families were only women, so that families would get together and farm together. And that went on for 2 years until the Germans had to leave again. But those were good years. We had enough to eat. Now, it's hard for Americans to understand that, but we felt that the Germans were our liberators, because we did not need to fear that men would disappear, and we had enough to eat. We did not need to, the government wasn't taking any food away from us. But that was short-lived, because in 43, the Battle of Stalingrad turned the war around. After the German lost that battle, we started hearing rumors that we might have to leave the village because the Germans were coming, the Russians were coming. And we did not want to live under communism again. And what that meant was to leave. We didn't know where we were going, but we did leave. And I describe it in the book. I won't tell the details. We were on that journey on foot. I mean, everybody could walk, had to walk. And our family had 3 horses. And so we had a big wagon and took as much supply along as possible. 2 weeks, the first day, we were all lined up, about 50 wagons from our village going west when we were strafed by Russian planes. We dove into the ditches, and I thought that was my last, that I would be killed. When the strafing stopped, we went back to find our wagons. The horses had been spooked, and they were all over the field. And the herd of cattle that had been herded along was completely dispersed, and we had no way of finding them. And the leader, the village leader, said, just drive, go, because we heard cannons exploding and other artillery in the back. So it was a constant push. The first day we drove and walked 35 kilometers to the city of Krivoy Rog, which has been in the news lately. It's an industrial city, and that's where we had to stop because the German army could not move. All the roads were clogged. Even though we went on mud roads, we couldn't move, and so we had to spend the night there. And that night, the city was in flames. We were on the outskirts. The Russians were on one side and the Germans the other, and the fire went. They fought each other. That was the second time that I thought I would not live to see the morning. Anyway, from then on, am I making it too long? I won't go into much more detail. But the first 2 weeks, we just drove and ate what my mother had prepared. Usually it was fried chicken. I butchered a lot of chicken, baked a lot of tzivak, and had butchered a hog and the lard was brought along. So we cooked. We had to cook early in the evening so that the fire was out by the time airplanes might come. Anyway, the first 2 weeks, the weather was pretty good, and then it started sleeting and snowing, and we had to continue walking. We had slept under the wagons, but now we looked for big collective farm barns where we might spend the night. Well, eventually we got to a place. It rained and rained and rained. And the mud, the horses sometimes couldn't carry what the load was. So things were taken off the wagons and left beside of the road. And when it got cold, people started getting sick. We never undressed, we never washed. The lice multiplied. And when we did sleep in barns, hundreds of thousands of refugees had slept there before and left the lice, and we picked up more and more. So that was a struggle. Anyway, 1 month into the trek, the weather got so bad, and we didn't hear the constant fire or the explosions. So the village leader decided that we would stop for the winter in a Ukrainian village. 7 of us, it was my mother, my sister, 3 brothers, aunt and I, were assigned to to a family, and their house consisted of one room, and we lived with the couple there. Again, we didn't undress. We all slept on straw on the floor, and didn't bathe or wash. I don't remember where we got the food from, but we had food again. Anyway, then the army got closer and closer, and we were told that we needed to leave again. And eventually, well, we left. The first day, some horses fell on the ice and broke their legs, and it was bitterly cold. Later in life, I learned that it was the coldest winter since Napoleon had lost the war in Russia. It's very cold. And yeah, but we had to pack up and leave. And as I said, on the first day, it was miserable. And so after those horses were killed, the leader said we should go back to the village, and that they were going to try and get a train, boxcars, which eventually happened. A week later, we were loaded into boxcars and taken the rest of the way. We landed in Poland, and there we were in a refugee camp. Shall I tell the rest how I got here?
Yes.
It's getting pretty lengthy. I hadn't meant to go into so much detail. But anyway, we were in the refugee camp for a short time. There we found out where some of my brothers were. Through the Red Cross, we found that 3 of my older brothers, where they were, and one of them had been evacuated with the factory where he was an engineer from Ukraine to Alsace-Lorraine to France. And my mother got in contact with them right away, and my brother invited her to come and stay with them because he had work, he had food, he had an apartment. And my mother said, I can't leave the family, but I'll send you stuff. I was scrawny, underdeveloped, undernourished, and she wanted me to go and stay with them till I got better. And an older brother took me by train to France with the understanding I agreed to go if they promised that I could come back in a short time. 3 months was the thing. Well, before the 3 months were over, France was occupied by the Americans, and Poland was where my mother was occupied by the Russians. So we lost all contact with them. We finally, I'm going to leave out some things here, finally met a Canadian relief worker by the name of Peter Dick, who was in Canada helping distribute food and clothing from America through MCC. Some of you, I'm sure, have heard of MCC. And yeah, he found us in France and took us to safety to Holland. Holland we were in danger of being repatriated in France because we were US citizens due to Yalta Agreement. But Holland was not under the Yalta Agreement, so we were safe there. In Holland, I met someone from Minnesota, and she didn't have any sisters, and I was an orphan, so to speak, because I didn't know about my mother. And she asked me if I would like to be her little sister. And I thought she was joking. I said, yeah, I would like that. unbeknownst to me, she contacted her parents and they wanted to adopt me. So one day she said, we have papers for you to go to America. And I said, oh, but we want to go to Canada to my mother's family where they live. And I told my brother that I was with that I had a chance to go to America, and he said, no, you're not going there unless you get somebody to sponsor me and I can go with my family. And that happened, and eventually we got to Mountain Lake, Minnesota. Long story. I'm sorry.
Well, I don't know how you would decide any part of that to leave out. And I should point out to our audience that you were 13 at the beginning of this journey, and that you were able to graduate high school in Minnesota. Only 1 year after
I
the
hadn't
other
been in
people your
school for 4 years, and I started in the 7th grade. I was 17 by the time I got there.
Now, I had intended to ask you when you were most afraid, and I believe you've already shared that because I think it was when you were being strafed.
Yeah.
But you no doubt had many other times when you were most afraid, probably even coming to America. You probably couldn't believe that it was really happening. And would this all be taken away from you? And the fear of, will I ever see my mother, or will I find out about my mother and my aunt also? And maybe a better question at this point is, when were you the most hopeful on your journey?
When I came here. When I came to America. I mean, the fact that I would be able to go to school, Magdalene Friesen assured me that I could. I wanted to because all of my brothers had gone to universities or so, and that was an expectation in my family that everybody be educated. And so when Magdalene promised I could do that, I was the most hopeful. Of course, when I came here, my dreams changed. I had, as a child, planned to be a pilot, just like Amelia Earhart. When I was 13, well, before 13, I'd seen a news clip when she took off. So I wanted to be a pilot. And the other thing, when I heard my brother talk about attending or going to a ballet in St. Petersburg, I decided, no, I'd rather be a ballerina. But when I came here, I already knew that I would not ever achieve those dreams. But my other dream was to become a nurse. My mother was very sick when I was about 9 or 10, and I took care of her. She had malaria one summer and was delirious and talked nonsense, which scared me to death. I was so young and I didn't know what was going on or what was happening. But intuitively I knew that if I could learn how to take care of a sick person, then I wouldn't be afraid. And later on I read in the Bible, and the truth shall make you free, or something like that. I thought that was an intuitive thing with me. So when I came here, I knew I could still become a nurse.
Yes, and being in America allowed you to pursue what ended up being your real dream. Can you share briefly what part has nursing played in your life? You've had a variety of jobs that are related to it.
To be brief. And now you know I can't be very brief. How has it affected me? Is that what you're asking?
Well, just what opportunities have you had to use your nursing? Because you didn't just get a bachelor's degree. You had
No.
yeah.
After my bachelor's degree, after 3 years of nurses training, I went back to college and got a bachelor's degree in nursing administration. And I was in Newton. And I worked a while, I worked during the time that I went to college. And then after graduating, I decided to go into voluntary service. I had been given so much.
And that was the way to give back,
I
wasn't it?
wanted to give back. So the first summer, I was sent to Bapa, Manitoba. That is 500 kilometers north of Winnipeg. And I worked in a TB sanitarium. We called them Eskimos and Indians at that time. Now they call them Inuit people. It was very different than what I had experienced nursing in Newton, Kansas. And the second summer, I came back and worked another year, and then the second summer I went to London, Ontario, to work in a psychiatric hospital. The reason I chose a psychiatric hospital was that during my nurse's training, the last year, affiliating with Wesley Hospital on the psych ward scared me to death. All we did was do shock treatment and insulin treatment. And I saw that some of these patients, they weren't any different than I was. I had very depressed patients, and I didn't know that I was depressed, except somebody told me one time, you can't sleep because you're depressed. And we were tested by a psychologist on that unit, and he handed out the results to us randomly and didn't explain what the test meant. And I didn't show mine to anybody because my test said that I was very naive. And I was embarrassed. And I was scared. What does that mean? Anyway, that led me into the field of psychiatry. I was in London, Ontario, and I got a letter from somebody that worked at Prairie View saying that they were going to offer a course in advanced psychiatric nursing. And I thought, well, maybe I can take that and I'll not be afraid of psychiatry. Well, I came for 1 year and I couldn't leave because I was getting in touch with my own feelings. I found out that I was a very angry person. But I didn't admit that. But later on, I realized I was very angry at God for having cheated me. I felt cheated that I'd lost my family. And so I stayed. And while at Prairie View, I learned that many of the staff were in therapy. They were getting treatment, and so I decided to get treatment. And that kept me there for 39 years. No, I wasn't in treatment for 39 years.
Although you earned the right.
But anyway, and while I was there, I went back to school to get the degree in gerontology, master's degree. And I couldn't leave because it was the kind of atmosphere where you're pushed from one thing to another to different areas. I was pushed along to various areas in the system that really helped me mature and become well, or at least more well than I was. Is that what you want? Is that what you asked?
A whole nother journey for you. I mean, your whole life has been a journey. And I hope that you no longer feel fear, because you're surrounded by people who love and respect you. So many people feel that way about you. I think I'd like to come back to your Ukrainian childhood. If you watch the news, it's full of more news about Ukraine, who is again under attack. What advice would you have for Ukrainian children if you were able to give a message to children who are living in Ukraine at this time?
Initially, I thought I had to watch all the news I could possibly see. And eventually, I couldn't do it. But right from the beginning, I was reminded of what we feared most. Somehow it was communicated to girls, and the women knew it. The most dangerous things are the soldiers. Not the strafing, not the military, not the bombings, but the men, the soldiers. So, and warned, how to keep safe. And what I would tell children now, try everything possible to stay safe. And that this too will end. Someday you may feel safe. Someday it will change. At least I believe it has to change. This war has to end.
And you are living proof that things can change,
No.
and that you've had a wonderful life.
I have had a very wonderful
Yes.
life. I am very grateful. And thank you for those of you who helped MCC survive. I mean, they're right now helping. It's amazing what is being done there to the local population with the money or the relief that is sent there. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's probably a good place to stop with our conversation. Maybe some of you have a question that you'd like to ask Justina. She will be signing books, so you may also come up and just visit with her privately, but I didn't know if anyone had. Okay, yes, what is your question?
In all your adaptations, which that's the theme I get, is you just adapted and adapted. Did you have to adapt your language?
Did you adapt your language? Did you adapt your language for this other book?
Or just in your life, did you have to speak
Oh,
a
I see.
different language?
Yes, yes.
And
The
another
languages
language.
you've spoken. in
You
your
know,
life.
I was
What you meant for this.
fortunate to be sponsored by a family who spoke Low German. That was my mother tongue. I did speak High German and Russian too, but they spoke Low German. And he had been a teacher, so I was very fortunate. Immediately he started preparing me for school. We had a set time when we would meet, and I would have to read to him. And another thing, that's sort of a side thing, but English comes from the Anglo-Saxon language, and Low German does too. And so there were words similar. It was not very difficult for me to learn English, except spelling. Spelling was just very hard.
Yes. Oh, I just want to make a comment. Justina, Bob's and my dear friend Ingrid, we've been friends for 30 years. But the way she volunteers now is teaching English as a second language at the Indo-Chinese Center here in Wichita. And it's amazing to me the tradition. Oh, and she's your niece. And how the gifts of one generation are passed to another generation, and how much your family impacts the world, even in spite of your great difficulties. So she's doing it too.
Thank you.
Excellent point, and so true.
Yes, I'm just curious, where did you go to nursing school?
Or did you go to nursing school?
Bethel Deaconess Hospital. You too? We graduated a different year. I can see that.
Anyone else have a question or a comment? All right, well, the books are for sale at the checkout area, yes, and Justina is here to visit with any of you and sign any books. Thank you very much for coming.
Let's all thank Justina and Beverly for joining us tonight. And we'll have Justina sign at the front, so if you'd like your book signed, we'll do a line right here. Thanks, everybody.